You're listening to Music Tectonics.
Hi everybody, welcome to Music Tectonics. I am Tristra Newyear Yeager, the music strategist and all-around writer and blabber here at Rock, Paper, Scissors, the music tech PR firm. And today I have with me two really amazing guests whose writing and thoughts I admire greatly. Bas Grasmayer and Maarten Walraven of Music X and many other projects and hats as well. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, very happy to be here.
Awesome. So before we jump into our conversation, which I'm sure is going to be really full of crazy ins and outs and ideas, Bas and Marten, if you could just introduce yourself a little bit, talk about your background, how you got interested in music and tech, and what you're involved with right now.
Maarten,
do you want to start,
go first? All right.
Let's go in alpha order. Okay, Bas, you go first. Sorry, I should have given you that little prompt.
I'm Bas, mostly known, I guess, for this newsletter that I started nearly 6 years ago now, called Music X. Originally, it was called Music Tech Future, but we've simplified it to just Music X. I have a background in music and tech. I started writing about kind of how artists can self-organize and identify new business models using kind of Web2 technologies together with their communities. And then I started working for various music companies. I think maybe the most, the projects most worth mentioning now is I worked into niche streaming services, one specialized in kind of serving the markets in Russia and kind of other former Soviet countries, and another one kind of specialized in classical music. And right now, besides Music X, I'm working with Colors, which is kind of like a music aesthetic curation brand.
Marten, how did you get into this crazy world of music tech?
So I did a PhD in history, but it was about the history of sound. So at least it was tangentially related to music. And then when I finished that, I started working for these two TV channels, one for classical music and one for jazz music. These two channels were acquired by a Canadian company called Stingray. And at Stingray, I kind of went through the really fast-moving media landscape of the past sort of 5 to 6 years, where we went from linear TV to on-demand apps, then back to linear TV, but with ads. That was a crazy ride. I learned a lot. And meanwhile, I read Bas's newsletter, and when he started Music X Corona, he asked for help, and I offered my help, and he accepted. And then now we have a Music X, which is a twice weekly newsletter where he writes it on Tuesdays and I write it on Thursdays. And when I left Stingray, I started a live streaming studio together with Arjen in Rotterdam called Garden, where we're trying to redefine what a music live stream is.
Excellent. And for those of you that don't read Music X, Marten, and you should, first of all, you should. And second of all, Marten and Bas are a really wonderful complementary duo. And you guys often come at similar issues or questions from very different perspectives in a way that I find really interesting. But okay, enough embarrassing praise and heaping compliments on you. I would love to start our conversation out by talking about something that Bas has been investigating a lot, and that is namely Web3. So first, there's a lot of chatter about Web3 now, and a lot of things are thrown into that basket. Can we talk for a second about what exactly Web3 is and how you define it?
Let's. How long is this podcast?
We're gonna make this a retreat, 3-day long retreat. No, so can you put it in a nutshell? Is that
sure.
or is that?
I think I think like the term Web3 became really popular to refer to kind of like a convergence of trends. And so for years, we've been talking in music industry about blockchain. There was at one point there was not a music conference without a blockchain panel, and then it kind of like disappeared again. Um, and then until quite recently, I think, where instead of maybe using the words blockchain, we might be talking about crypto or NFTs and things like that. Um, for me, what is interesting about like um, broadening it to kind of a context that we call Web3 is really thinking about what is being built, what is being built over the next 10 years. And I think we've so from Web 1, Web 2, we went from an internet of people having their own websites and their own locations on the internet to people having accounts and profiles on platforms. And instead of going to look up things on different pages, you would just get like all your information through feeds. Um, then the algorithms came on top of that and things like that, but also kind of the business models of that day and age of like kind of advertising models, basically, and needing to monopolize people's attention and eyeballs for that. And that has led to, I think, like kind of certain, I don't know, platform economy dynamics. And I think now with Web3, um, there's this sense like, hey, if we're contributing value to a network, we shouldn't be paying that same network or that same platform just to reach our own fans again. For instance, when we have a release, I don't want to name names, but like actually a lot of social media, if you have like a big following and you do like a big release, if you want to make sure that everyone sees it, you need to pay so that your post gets seen. That's a bit crazy, like how much value we're kind of contributing to these things, but we don't get to participate in that. So for me, the cool thing about Web3 is that it's kind of like these well, since it's based on blockchain, which is this kind of like decentralized database model, everything is registered to there, and it gives, if you're participating in a network, there's more of a sense of ownership. And so for me, I mean, oversimplified, we're going into this kind of distributed, decentralized social media landscape where the communities that are building things actually own part of the outcome and they get to participate in the value that they're generating together. And I think that's really exciting, especially looking at music and looking at kind of music's middle class and perhaps streaming royalties, you know, not really um, serving everyone as well as we think people should be served, or at least there's a lot of artists that definitely should be able to easily make a living online off of their music, but for some reason they're not. And I think now with some of these technologies coming out, there's real potential to do it like on your own terms. I went slightly further than just the definition, but that's also why I'm excited.
No, I like that. Yeah, no, every definition has a perspective and needs to have the context that surrounds it, and why, I mean, why the values that, you know, why do we need this technology if we can already do all the things technically, for the most part, that many Web3 elements like NFTs, etc., like those, they have unique properties, but yet they're not really doing anything at this point yet that is deeply revolutionary. However, I love what you're saying, Bas, about sort of recalibrating in some ways the incentives and or changing the relationships in this economy. I mean, what are some good examples that you've seen of this kind of dynamic where we're seeing artists being compensated more appropriately for the value they produce?
Well, one of my favorite examples is actually there's a so-called DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization. It doesn't really matter, but basically, I mean, I'm not going to get too deep into the definition right now, but it's called FWB, or Friends with Benefits. And in order to be a member, you need to hold a certain amount of tokens that sit on the blockchain. They're yours; they cannot be taken away. So, unlike a group membership on Facebook, where Facebook can just change a little thing in their database and bam, you're out, you lose everything. In this case, you have something that sits with you. It's not a monthly membership fee or anything like that. It's like tokens that you own and hold. So that's set up as a creative community, or like a community of creatives that are interested in Web3 and want to do things with that. And it became, there was a lot of hype around it. So the price of these tokens, they started to increase really fast. And then at one point, like kind of late summer, when it was really expensive to attain a membership, kind of the only people that you saw joining and introducing themselves in the introductions channel in FWB were like kind of investor type people. And at first it was like, oh, that's really cool to have like all these creatives and investors in the same room, but also was very aware, like I think it was about $8,000 at the time to attain the tokens. Most artists that I know, they don't just have that money sitting around that they can just like reserve it just to be able to be part of, like, let's say Discord. It's a bit more than that, but Discord is a chat app. So like just to be part of a huge chat group and network. And I started thinking, like, what might happen next? It's like, would I be interested kind of long term just hanging out in a room full of investors? It's like, probably not. It's like I work in the music industry. I deliberately chose to work in this rather than some other domains that I'm also somewhat interested in, but I like the people in music. And so then what might happen long term is like, well, maybe the initial kind of creative crew might get less and less active and slowly just kind of migrate away. And it's like, hey, that is actually like kind of digital gentrification of a community where like first the artists come in, they make it like a cool spot, and then like people with more money come in, and then the artists can't afford it anymore. But in this case, they can sell their tokens and they can make a profit. Like if they bought it before summer and then sold after summer, I think the value multiplied like eightfold. So I think that's really cool, where there's just something built into participating in a community that if the value or the perceived value, I don't know if there's really much of a difference between value and perceived value, but I'll leave that to economists. But if the perceived value of this community goes up, you participate in it by default. And I think that's really special. So that's like one example. And then there's another example that I can highlight if there's time. Otherwise, cut this.
Yeah, go for it. Well, actually, let's spend another minute here with this kind of community and example for a second, and then I want to hear your second example. And Maarten, I'd love to hear your input on this as well. I mean, if you look at the coverage and just some of the projects coming out, some of the coverage around some decentralized, or metaverse type platforms or environments, you basically hear a reproduction of the current states of, our class and economic system. Sorry, everyone, getting a little bit pink here. You hear basically we're reproducing the inequalities and distortions of our current economy in the metaverse. So how do you guys imagine we could, just knowing that's happening right off the bat, and this is still such a like green field, how could we compensate for that?
So one of the ways that Web3 protocols allow compensation for that is that you can change what you compensate, right? So there's a lot of, like, I'm really interested in DAOs that reward curiosity, for example. So you don't, like with Friends with Benefit, you need to buy those tokens, and not everybody has money. But there's also plenty of DAOs, and I think I can kind of guess what Bas's next example will be. Where if you are active, you get tokens. If you do certain tasks, you get tokens. If you ask questions, you get tokens. So those kinds of reward systems or bounty systems, as they're sometimes called, exist as well, and you can define them and then just put them into a smart contract.
Yeah, so there are other ways we could assign value and thus give tokens out to people participating beyond just the simple monetary standards that everyone is so used to. It's like, digging out what are other values besides money. And as an American, that is often the measure of value people are most comfortable with. But there might be other measures of value. And as musicians and music lovers, we often have a pretty intuitive and or like visceral experience of value that goes beyond money. Anyway, this is getting awfully philosophical, which is my jam, but I want to take it back.
Yeah, but that's okay, because a lot of crypto talk is also about that sort of value, right? But there is, especially when you talk about communities, there's a lot of different ways that you can describe value.
I think, I mean, just to add to that, also like the word philosophical, I think it's actually that's a really important thing. I think right now a lot of these experiments, they're happening really close to the infrastructure. Like they're essentially like, imagine in the 90s very original ways to set up like email servers or something like that. Like that's, I mean, that's not something we think about. We just create a Gmail account now. But that's how close we're kind of operating towards like the blockchain infrastructure. And a lot of it is just like experimentation and ideas and different visions for what does value mean, and how do we want communities to create together. And yeah, I mean, you could you hear these things clearly. I think to answer the previous question too, which was about what can people do in light of kind of these like economic models. I think the nice thing about like Web3 technologies is that you can set things up to operate on your own terms rather than having everything run through a publicly traded company with very specific values. And then when I say everything, I mean where you post your photos, where you have your groups, where you post your events, where you do your direct messaging. Currently, a lot of that for a lot of people, 90% runs through like one company. And then your kind of indirectly, I mean, I love the phrase program or be programmed. If you haven't made the interface, you're behaving according to the rules and the values by the creator that come from the creators of the interface. And that's like a complex thing because there's like loads of people contributing to it and market forces and all of that stuff. But what I like about Web3 is that people are kind of trying to build the tools that you can kind of like plug and play and put together in ways in which maybe it's more aligned with what your own values are. And especially now that we're in like a really experimental stage. So that's also why things feel like really clunky, really hard to understand, are not easy to use. It's kind of relatively easy to make an expensive mistake. I made one the other day where I was demoing how to set up a wallet and I didn't save my seed phrase. And because of that, I'm locked out of it now. And there's something that wasn't valuable then in there, but it attained value in the meantime, and I'll never be able to get to it. It's okay. I never really had it, so I never really lost it either. But that stuff happens. It's okay. It's just like kind of experimental phase. So you have to just roll with what it gives you. I think the learnings and the connections you build are anyway way more valuable than any one particular thing in that. So
amazing. When your talk about interface, Bas, makes me think a bit about another favorite topic of mine and something that I really think is going to shift the way we think about music in the next year or so. And that is the ease now that people can make music. And by people, I don't mean just, the quote unquote bedroom producers, or I hate this word, prosumers, the folks that everyone has been thinking about for like the last 10 years who are sitting with a laptop, like making music in some way, shape or form in a home studio setup. But I mean the folks who are maybe riding a bus or walking in the woods or doing other things and either using a phone or a small device or some other means to create music and capture it so that they can then mess around with it more. I'm just curious how you guys are seeing this shift, if it's one that you're thinking about in any way, and any thoughts you have on it.
So there is such ridiculous amounts of music being made, and I mean the stat is almost a year old now, so it'll probably be closer to 90,000. But there's 60,000 songs uploaded to Spotify every day. I was speaking to Meng not long ago from BandLab, and he mentioned that there's 11 million songs every month created through the app. They don't get released. I don't know how many musicians you know, but I know quite a lot of musicians, and most of them
Yeah.
just make music for themselves, right? Maybe they put something out on Bandcamp, or they release something through DistroKid, and it ends up on a DSP, and they get 15 listeners. But they don't care because they make music for themselves. But because this proliferation of quite okay to good music is coming out, the marketplace is filling up. And when you think about like supply and demand, that's problematic. So when we think about like business models moving forward, we have to kind of think about what do you need to do to monetize your music if I can listen to any music I want for hardly any money. And that's again when issues surrounding community come in, because then you need to create a community around yourself that is invested in you in a different way than just being a casual listener. And that's there. A lot has already happened. If we look at the creator economy and all the business models surrounding that, now with Web3, there is new ways to monetize again through NFTs or different ways, and all of these little additions mean growth, right? That's sort of
And
where I am at.
If distribution at scale is no longer a goal or any, if you can monetize other ways, right? If you don't have to just throw your things into the giant Spotify pot, the spot pot, that could really change people's attitude to the music they make, right? That could have some creative repercussions if suddenly we shift away from recorded music as a widget that must be sold to like a recording that is ephemeral or experiential, or I don't know. It's an interesting, I think we're at the edge of a model shift in certain ways.
I think so too. I think also like what is interesting in, from what Maarten mentions, I think like probably the most significant change or shift in music societally, and I think actually Maarten is way more well read on this topic than I am. But like I think the most important shift in the past century has been kind of the proliferation of the recording and recorded music, because let's go like kind of pre-recording. If you wanted to hear your favorite song, someone around you or you yourself should be able to play or sing it. So there was way more of a kind of like social nature to music. It was more participative, and certain new aspects of like there being like one official version of a song that everyone knows, everyone has heard the original or supposedly the original singer perform the song, and you can play it as many times as you want, etc. So that's like a relatively new aspect to music. What I think is also new to music is just the size of catalogs that we have access to. So I think music now is able, with these apps and stuff like that you were talking about, is able to move into like more like smaller and more specific contexts, where perhaps we're also able to find models, business models that don't rely on being really good inside kind of a catalog landscape. I just want to, before I go into the next part, I have a background in streaming. Whenever I say stuff about like streaming, I don't mean this critically of any streaming service, but I think there's certain ways in which streaming works. And one of the ways in which streaming works is it's optimized for getting the most value out of catalogs for listeners, but it's not optimized for getting the most value out of like an artist-fan relationship. And what I mean with that is that if a streaming service wants to make ad revenue or wants to sell their subscriptions, every time someone opens the app, they need to find something that they listen to. That's like an important metric, whether people actually play something, how often they come back to play something, how long are their listening sessions. These are all like kind of key metrics to understanding like conversion and retention. And you do that by like optimizing what people can get out of a catalog and listening to like loads of stuff and spreading them kind of thin over like many artists and genres and things like that. So um, and I'm thinking like as an artist, what can you do now to stand out and perhaps think smaller and not participate in the catalog thing, because you're just never going to see like huge returns unless you're like in the top, I don't know, this is something from Mark Monaghan, but like top 5% or so of streaming. And I think if you're outside of that, you might not really make a living from streaming, and that's fine. I think like streaming, the function is to have this kind of basic layer of data and basic layer of maybe financial infrastructure that things can plug into, but we need to build on top of that. And I think that's taken really long to emerge. But I think in the past 2 years, with kind of creator economy, and now with Web3, we're starting to see that. And it will be really interesting. I think here's the risk for streaming services for the next 10 years or so. When artists start building business models, either together with their fan bases or with each other for creative communities, selling NFTs and things like that, over time, they might start to care a little bit less about updating those things that used to be important for them. Just like how at some point people were just updating their Facebook and they stopped updating their MySpace at one point. And I wonder how, the distribution of music, whether people will keep distributing music everywhere to these streaming services. I wonder if people would just start forgetting about it because it's not important to them anymore at one point. So it won't be like a deliberate choice, like, oh, I'm going to boycott streaming or something like that, but rather it might kind of like fade away in importance, and maybe music will become more of a part of music will be something that you might find in the niches of the internet and niches of social landscapes, just like a little bit like how music scenes were pre 2000s, pre Napster, basically, with Napster Unlocked being able to like discover all this music. But before that, you had to walk into the right room in the right city to discover about genres, or read the right magazines and have the right connections, have the right local record shop that's getting records from somewhere. And I think that's kind of coming back in some way with these kind of community models, because nobody's super satisfied with the economics that emerged from this kind of catalog focus of music consumption.
Yeah, just to kind of add on to that, I think that there is indeed like an opportunity for new music to find a community that doesn't necessarily have to be very big, right? We went from 1,000 superfans to 100 superfans to like a single cult fan that buys your music NFT for a couple of ETH, and that allows you to make music again for a couple of months. So with this narrowing of like your needed fan base, or the fan base you need to like sustain your art, there will still be this sort of group of people that will win. I don't think this whole new model is going to make a step away from like the total 100% of everybody is going to make a living out of their musical art. But it is just another thing to add on top, right? So for a lot of people, catalog will remain important, because I don't think that there will be, like, don't think everybody will want to be like this lean-in listener to this artist that they're a super fan of. There will still be moments where, you're having a dinner or something and you just want to hear some music in the background, and it doesn't particularly matter what it is specifically. So I'm not sure if it's like a total democratization in that sense, but I think it is like this positive development. And just to come back to what Bas was saying, one of the things that I think might happen is that songs will come out they will become popular, and those songs will be picked up by people who own catalogs, and they will monetize it through things like DSPs or push for more sync licenses, etc., etc.
Yeah, totally agree. And maybe just to add, because I think a lot of people think, especially people who talk about Web3, think like Web3 is going to replace everything. I think like these landscapes kind of build on each other and kind of compounds. I think like what we got with the internet, and as a kind of side effect, piracy has been really great. I'm happy to live in this time where you can find all this music and explore all this music and connect to all these artists so easily. And then like kind of streaming building on top of that. And now we get to like a new phase where I think we're unlocking like loads of opportunities really quickly, but it's not going to tear apart like the foundations that is coming from and that is like building upon.
It's funny, we often talk about democratization and sort of this concept that somehow everyone should earn money from art if they want to, which to me has always been a little bit, honestly, a little bit suspect. In that if you look back in history, most people who made art never earned any money, right? They, even if they were paid, I mean, you can think about like, what is it, the 17th and 18th century sort of German town bands. And, there's all sorts of examples in the US as well of people who maybe received a small amount of money for what they were doing, but definitely could not have been, considered, couldn't consider that their sole livelihood. So while that may not be our goal for the future, we may want something different for people who make music, or we may want to value music more highly from an economic perspective. This sort of myth of the middle-class musician has never really been well defined, right? We're kind of chasing at least a post-war American phantom a little bit. And I would love, no one's ever done this research that I know of. And if I'm wrong, Maarten, I want you to call me out on this, but there's not a ton of research about, who actually put themselves down as a full-time musician in 1935 in the US, right? Who was earning money that way? How many people were there? What were they earning in today's dollars? Like, what are we really talking about? So again, not that the past should dictate our hopes for the future, but I kind of always want to put a historical caveat in there when people start griping about the current situation, and just say that, musicians have rarely earned money and they've rarely been sufficiently compensated for the value they've given. So we either have to totally change that, but we shouldn't look back to some mythical golden past. Anyway, I'll get off my soapbox now. Maarten, I want to talk to you for a moment about what sounds like one of your specialties, which is live streaming. But do you have something to say first in response to my little rant?
Well, I mean, if you go back to like the 1930s, you should start looking at census records. It's really boring
fun.
historical work.
That's so much fun.
But they tell you a lot of yeah, exactly. They tell you a lot of stuff though. I mean. You make a great point there on your soapbox, and just to kind of add on top of that is like, it's also okay to go back to like models that we had in the 17th and 18th century. Johann Sebastian Bach earned his money because he was specifically paid to make music for very specific circumstances and occasions, and it's wonderful, beautiful music that we still listen to centuries later. So if you get like an assignment to make music, and in like a Web3 environment, your own little DAO can be the person who assigns that music task to you. That's totally okay. That doesn't mean that you're not going to be this rock and roll star. Art doesn't have to like come from.
We can throw out the Lord Byron model like right now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yes, but we wanted to speak of live streaming. So it's a really interesting juncture right now for live streaming, just as it is for Web3. In some ways we all got a taste of it and got to dabble in live streaming as fans. but now people are kind of trying to make decisions, and I'm wondering, what's the model? How are people imagining the future in terms of models? Are they thinking more like sports, right, where some people see the live event and some people see the broadcast event? Are we thinking, geo-fenced, super targeted regional live streams so that you can really get to your fans in Uruguay, but you can't go there on a tour, that kind of thing? What are you thinking about, Maarten?
All of that, but first and foremost, I'm thinking about live streaming as a form of presenting music, and that is not really something that exists yet. So live streaming isn't a new thing. We've been doing it for since 1996, and more seriously since 2009, 2011. I think U2's YouTube live stream concert was 2009, and Twitch launched in 2011. So those are good dates to toss out there. And what we've basically been doing, and especially during the pandemic, was okay. So we do live streaming, we put a camera up, and we film musicians. That does not take full advantage of the medium, right? There is an individuality in the digital medium that needs to be taken advantage of, and we can just look at film and steal everything they do and put that in a live stream. So we have to think about storytelling, we have to think about story arc, we have to think about the attention span of the people that are watching, and make sure that you use lighting, you use the camera. I always say, if you're standing in front of a stage and the singer is doing his thing, but the bass player is something that you're more interested in, you can look at her, right? And you don't have to look at the singer. But if you're doing filming, if you're filming the set, then the camera decides where the viewer is going to be watching. So those are very specific things that you can play with. But yeah, I mean, and then I definitely also think about all of the stuff that you mentioned. If you look at some of the consolidation that's been going on since sort of March this year, when Live Nation acquired Veeps, those kinds of players are definitely looking to expand the audience and expand the geographical reach, and expand the experience, right? So I tend to go back to this Michael Rapino quote, from when Live Nation acquired Veeps, where he said, people will go to the venue or they watch it online. If they watch it in the live stream, they will do so because they cannot make it to the venue, or maybe it's sold out, or they're interested in something different, right? So they want to see what's going on backstage, or they want to have a close-up of the drummer, etc., etc. So those are the kind of two main things that you hear about a lot. And then for me, that part about how do you add on another thing that people can enjoy music through, and also again monetize, of course.
And this is an interesting question. I love how you're referring to sort of a lot of the visual aspects of enjoying a live stream, like looking at one performer versus another. The sort of context of when and how you could make a concert versus a live stream. What about the sonic aspect? I know you think really, you judging by some of your past research, Maarten, you think very carefully about the meaning of sound in different contexts and how it defines communities or performer-viewer relationship, however we want to talk about it. Do you have any thoughts on live stream sound and how that might differ from a live performance sound or a recorded track, or that? Any interesting thoughts there?
Well, I mean, if I look at what we're doing at Garden, what we aim for is a balance between the clean studio sound and the live sound, right? And I think that is interesting because it's a slightly different way of experiencing the music again. But one of the ways that you can play with interactivity, which should be an important element to any live stream show, is that you can draw in the audience by playing with audio. Yeah. So and you can do this by speaking to them directly. And if they're listening with headphones, that becomes a super intimate experience. If they've been like casting the stream onto their TV and they have it on like the TV speakers or maybe a more elaborate hi-fi set, then it becomes more immersive. And you can also play around with like audio things that are in the background and come into the foreground, and this sort of gives a sense of space that doesn't actually exist because it's 2D, but similar to what you can do with visuals, you can give the sense of space through
I love
audio
that
as
it
well.
can't be too clean. That's really amazing.
No, I mean we did one live stream here at Garden, and it was so ridiculously good that
Oh
everybody was
no.
like, so this was pre-recorded.
Somebody please, like, make sure that something is clipping or that there's some weird distortion.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
You need mistakes.
I love it. It's important. Mistakes are really important in art. Cool. Well, thanks for spending the time talking to me about all of these things. Before we say goodbye, I get to ask you guys one of my favorite questions, and that is, we get to, as we say on Music Tectonics, get a little bit sci-fi. And this is kind of coming out of the blue, so just answer it however you want. What's the thing you're most excited about? Like, what do you hope you see in 5 years in the music tech world? It could be anything. It could just be like, I finally want a good preamp that doesn't cost, X amount of dollars. Or it could be something much more sweeping and cultural in its dimensions. So, Bas, why don't you start? What are you thinking about? What is the most exciting development you see for the next, say, 5 years or so?
I think what I find really exciting to see in the context of like some of these Web3 communities that I'm in, and I'll mention one because I said I was going to give it as an example. We never got to it.
Sorry.
No, it's no worries.
We wandered too far afield.
It's homework for everyone, but like check out a project called Songcab. It's really worth checking out. And what's really exciting for me about this space is artists collaborating in communities to get ahead, to help each other. And whenever someone's successful, for example, this is not the only measure of success in Web3, but it's just an easy example. When someone sells an NFT for like loads of money, I'm thinking of someone like perhaps Latasha, who's definitely like worth checking out for so many reasons, as an artist, as a person with vision, someone who's really active in this space. You see these people invest back into other creators, invest into DAOs, invest into grants for other artists. And I think it's really exciting, the super direct involvement that people have in like bringing each other up. And it's happening really fast. I mean, certain genres and subcultures have histories of this. I'm particularly thinking about hip hop, where people were bringing like their crews up, and producers that they knew, and they were making sure everyone's kind of like getting paid. But all of this is like happening faster. It's permeating way more of our culture, and I think it's permeating just really a lot of like kind of Web3 culture, where people, if you have a bit of success, you invest in like what you think in the artists that you think are also going to make it or should be making it, who need that support at that particular moment. I think it's so cool to see artists supporting artists and investing in each other, and actually having the ability to invest in each other. So that's something that I hope will be absolutely normal and normalized in 5 years, and also might help more people if they don't want to do things within the confines and constructions and structures of what exists today. Then they have more options to do it outside of that because they have fellow artists supporting them. That's kind of the very optimistic dream and vision that I have for like 5 years from now, but it's already happening. So I'm just dreaming about the scale at which it will happen in 5 years.
I like optimism. It's easy to be a pessimist. Optimism is hard. So I love that example. All right, Maarten. Now, unfortunately, you have to answer this difficult question. What are you most excited about, and what's your vision for 5 years from now? And we won't hold anyone.
Things definitely change. So I think I might keep it a bit broad as well. What I hope to see in 5 years is that a lot of the things that we're experimenting with now, and that's not just Web3, but also things like AR and VR and the way that AI and ML can help us in like the production of music and the tagging of music and all that sort of stuff. That those experiments are fruitful and that they are adopted, that they find either a large audience or a niche audience to exist in, and that in each iteration there is a new set of artists who find a way to make a living for themselves. So again, that's a super optimistic take and quite broad. But yeah, that's sort of where I am, what I was thinking.
It's great. Awesome. Well, thanks both of you for your time and for your amazing thoughts. And yeah, have a great day.
Thanks very much for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to Music Tectonics. If you like what you hear, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. We have new episodes for you every week. Did you know you can dig deeper into all our episodes with the show notes at musictectonics.com. While you're there, look for the latest about our annual conference, sign up for our newsletter to get updates, or get the Music Tectonics app for music tech news. Everything we do explores seismic shifts that shake up music and technology the way the Earth's tectonic plates cause quakes and make mountains. Connect with Music Tectonics on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and find me, Dimitri Vitsa, if you can spell it, on LinkedIn. Bye-bye!
You're listening to Music Tectonics.